I had an excellent conversation with Judge Garland this morning, and we talked about a number of things, but I think before I begin describing our discussion, I want to describe a bit of what the process is that's going on. Judge Garland has now met with something like 25 or 30 senators. He will be meeting with more today and in the coming weeks. And it occurred to me that what's really going on here is a slow motion hearing without the public's ability to participate and observe, which I think is too bad. I think what we ought to be doing is letting the public see Judge Garland, hear him answer questions, get an idea of his judicial philosophy, who he is, what his temperament and personality are, and that's why I think a hearing would be so profitable. It's very beneficial for individual senators to be able to meet with him one-on-one, and I'm delighted to have been able to do so. But I think, in a sense, the public is being shut out of the process by not having public hearings, which people can observe and watch and see on TV and get to know who this guy is that's been nominated by the president for one of the most important jobs in the country. So I think that's the preliminary comment is it's very important to have these individual conversations, but let's also include the American people in these conversations so that they can have a say and have an understanding of who this individual is. We talked about a number of issues, ones that I raised. I'm concerned about the growth of the regulatory state and what the relationship is between regulators and our citizens, whether there is a danger of regulation being overly burdensome or not consistent with congressional action. So we did have some discussion of where the lines are, what are the principles when the court hears an appeal from regulatory action, which of course is a lot of what the D.C. Circuit does. We talked about the idea of executive action and where the limits are on executive orders and roles of the president in taking executive action. I think that's a significant issue. Clearly it is now. I think if the gridlock continues here in the Congress, it's probably going to be an issue for whoever the next president is, because they are going to want to press the boundaries of their authority in order to get things done at a frustration with the Congress. So I think that's going to be an ongoing issue that needs to be attended to. We also talked about a number of questions of judicial philosophy and approach to being a judge. We talked about his, I wanted to try to probe how he makes decisions, how he's worked on the Circuit Court of Appeals, and he shared some insights. His instinct as a judge is to try to find the narrowest way to make the decision in order to not make sweeping decisions that don't really relate to the case at hand. He has a respect for precedent. We talked about the principle of stare decisis, which is the principle of you don't disturb the precedent unless there's some extraordinary reason to do so. Also, we talked about his desire as Chief Judge of the Circuit Court to build consensus and the importance of building consensus and trying to marshal the court toward not only majority opinions, but when possible, unanimous opinions. And of course, we've been through a period where the court has been so sharply divided. Every decision seems to be 5-4 one way or another, and consensus building, I think, would be an important part of whoever is added to the court. We also talked about a concern that many people have about the politicization of the court, that the Supreme Court has, in essence, in many people's eyes, just become another part of the Congress, in effect, another lawmaking body, a sort of third branch of the legislature. And that's really not the way it's supposed to be. The court is supposed to be interpreting the law, reading the Constitution, applying the Constitution to statutes and regulations, and being judges, not politicians. And I believe Justice Roberts even addressed this point in the last several months, talking about the danger of politicization of the court. When the court is viewed as simply another political body, it undermines public confidence in the judicial system. It undermines public confidence in the government itself. And I understand a lack of confidence in the institution of which I'm a member, but if that lack of public confidence extends to the judiciary, if people don't think that they're getting fair decisions that are based upon law and the application of legal principles, but instead are simply political decisions dressed up with some kind of judicial garb, that's bad for the country. Because the Supreme Court does make important decisions. It does make decisions that are very important to the future of the country. It has many of the most contentious and difficult issues before it, and people have to feel that they're getting a real, clear, judging decision, not a political decision. I found Judge Garland to be what I call a small c conservative, not a conservative in a sense of some political movement, but a conservative in the sense of respect for precedent, respect for the law, not an activist in the terms of we're going to use the law as a political tool to right wrongs or to change the political situation of the country. And I found that was reassuring. I think he's, as I say, I think he's a small c conservative. I think he's a judicial conservative. He's not a judicial activist by any means that I could determine either from our conversation today or from his history as a member of the Circuit Court of Appeals. He's also, we talked a bit about his experience at the Oklahoma City bombing as a prosecutor, been an assistant U.S. attorney, been in private practice, and then we talked about history. And the first thing we talked about is that we had both recently seen Hamilton, and what an act of complete genius that show is. But that led us into a discussion of the founding of this country, and what an extraordinary moment it was that those people came together at that time and created a really amazing concept of government that has persisted to this day, but that there's no guarantees. When I was a kid, we referred to the American experiment, and it's still an experiment. And in the sweep of history, what we have in this country is anomalous, and it's not self-executing. Democracy is not self-executing. It takes thoughtful, serious, capable, responsible people with a temperament of quiet leadership in order to move this country forward. I was very impressed with Judge Garland. I'm not prepared to say if the vote were tomorrow I would vote for him. I would certainly be inclined in that direction, but I would like to see him in a public hearing answering questions from senators from both sides of the aisle, all sides of the aisle, and being able to present his views not only to the senators but to the American people. And as I said at the beginning, I think it's commendable that he is going through this process of meeting with individual senators, but I really think it would be important to the public for them to be able to see and hear him and get a feel for his intellect and temperament. And that brings me to my final point, which is there's no way to know today what the important case is going to be in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We just don't know. Therefore, a lot of detailed questions about your position on this or that issue are almost beside the point. The real question is, what is this person's temperament? Is he steady, thoughtful, and clear-headed? Secondly, what is his knowledge of the law and background in law? Number 3, what is his philosophy of judging? which is to apply the law in the narrowest possible way to the case at hand and reach a decision that's consistent with the Constitution and the laws of the country. And that's really the basis upon which we should be making this decision, not trying to predict how we would vote on any particular issue. The example I used in our conversation is George W. Bush, who was elected president in the year 2000 based upon a campaign that was almost entirely dominated by domestic issues and the economy, and suddenly was confronted 9 months later with September 11th, which became to dominate the rest of his presidency. You cannot predict now what the issues are going to be in 2017, 18, 19, or 2025. Therefore, you want good, solid, thoughtful, deliberate people in positions of authority. And I found Judge Garland to be such, subject to, I want to see him in a hearing answering questions from the Judiciary Committee and by extension from the American people. And then I will make my final decision. Thank you. Questions?
Senator, if are you going to be doing anything to convince your Republican colleagues to hold hearings?
Yes. I thought you were going to ask, were I going to do anything to convince them to vote for Judge Garland? The answer to that is no, but I am going to be talking to people. I don't understand the non-hearing decision. I guess I understand it as a political matter, but this is so important that I don't understand it as a policy matter. If we don't confirm a judge this year, we've essentially left the court without a ninth judge for the longest period in American history. And it will compromise their ability to make decisions not only this year, but next year. The term of the court runs roughly from the fall to the spring. And if we wait until the new president is elected, and then there's a typical 70 to 80, 90-day consideration period to confirm, that means we've got no judge for the next term of the court, not only this term, but next term. I just don't think that's responsible. So the answer is yes, and I don't understand, again, I understand politically, but I don't understand from a policy point of view. Are people afraid that the American people are going to see this fellow and like him? I mean, that's what I don't really get, and I think that may actually be the case. That people are afraid that once the American people see him, hear him, understand what a solid, thoughtful person he is, that then the resistance to even having a vote will evaporate. I don't know. I mean, it's a very odd thing, but I'm always suspicious when somebody doesn't want me to see something. And in this case, what these folks are saying is we don't want the American people to see Merrick Garland.
Senator, can I ask a question? You mentioned you want a hearing. Is there something specific you're hoping to learn or understand better about Judge Garland that a hearing would give you?
Well, I think a hearing would be a 2 or 3 or 4 hour extension of what I just experienced. So I can't predict what the questions would be, but it would give us an even better feel for who he is. And again, I'm less concerned and interested in specific answers I'm less concerned about specific answers than about how he approaches making decisions and what his temperament is and thinking about legal principles. I think that's the important thing, and I think if we have a hearing, we'll have that much more to go on. I was impressed this morning, but I think a hearing is part of the process, and it's a trial of sorts, and I think it would be good for the senators. And I don't know how he would do. He's not a politician. He's not a speech maker. He's a rather soft-spoken fellow, but he does convey a kind of integrity and thoughtfulness that I found impressive. In the course of a 4 or 5 hour hearing, I think that's an important, I think that would be another important step in this process. But again, I think it's important to emphasize that by not having a hearing, the public is really being excluded from the process. They don't have the opportunity to see him as I did today. And I think that's something that they should have the opportunity to do. Okay? Great. Thank you all. I'm sorry to keep you waiting so long, but he was an interesting guy to talk to.